I wasn't supposed to survive that day. When the grenade exploded 2 meters from my trench, my entire world went white. Not black-white. Like someone ripped reality away and left me in silence. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember my body flying through the air. I only remember waking up in mud. Soaked in blood that didn't all belong to me. The medic had already zipped up 3 of my brothers in arms. He looked at me, hesitated, then moved on. I knew what that meant. So, I crawled, with a shattered leg and no rifle. Crawled like an animal, through smoke, through frost, through the smell of burnt uniforms and iron. I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was I couldn't be captured. I was deep behind enemy lines. My squad was gone. And the last thing I heard before everything went quiet was, "They're pushing through. We're surrounded." By nightfall, I collapsed in a field near a broken fence, somewhere in the countryside. That's when I saw the light. A faint, flickering candle in the basement window of a nearby farmhouse. It could have been anyone. A family. A patrol. A bullet waiting for my head. But I had nothing left to lose. I knocked once, then fell to the ground. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in heaven. I was lying on a pile of old blankets, under a wooden ceiling. The scent of potatoes and whetstone filled the room. That's when I saw her gray hair, stern eyes, wrinkled hands shaking as she held a knife. Not to kill me, but to clean the dirt from my face. She whispered something in German I didn't understand, but I could read her eyes clearly. "You shouldn't be here." I wasn't just wounded, I was now a ghost, hiding in the home of the enemy, and I would stay there for the next 6 months. She didn't ask my name. I don't think she wanted to know. Names are dangerous in wartime. Names make things personal, and personal things get you killed. The first 3 days, I couldn't move. Fever, infection. My leg felt like it belonged to someone else, someone already dead. The old woman, whose name I later learned was Greta, brought me food without words. Bread, broth, water, no questions, just eyes full of warnings. Then, on the 4th night, the door opened again. This time, it was him, her son. He wore a faded German uniform, not a soldier anymore, but still dangerous. He looked at me like I was a plague that had entered his home. For a moment, I thought he'd shoot me. Right there in the basement, like a rat. But Greta stood in front of him. They argued upstairs. Loud, harsh. I couldn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. Fear, anger, desperation. Eventually, the house went quiet. And the next morning, the man brought down a proper bandage and a folded blanket. Still no words. That's when I realized they were going to let me live. But under rules, Greta made them clear, without ever speaking. Them, no noise, not even a whisper. No movement, unless the floor creaked upstairs. No light after sundown. No questions ever. I was not a guest. I was a secret. The war outside didn't pause for me. Some nights, I heard German officers visiting, laughter boots, toasting glasses, and there I was, directly beneath their feet, with shaking hands and a broken leg, praying they wouldn't hear me breathe. During the day, Greta brought me newspapers, always folded to the obituary section. That was the only place I could read without feeling guilt. Each night, I wondered if this was mercy or a slow execution. 6 months in silence can make you forget your own voice. But something worse was coming. Because one day, the front shifted again. And now our soldiers were the ones closing in. And they shoot anything that moves. It's strange what becomes normal. After a month in that basement, I could tell the time by the sounds above. Greta's footsteps were slow and soft. Her son, Marcus, stomped like a soldier even when he wasn't wearing the uniform. I learned the rhythm of their lives without ever speaking to them. I learned that Marcus drank too much. That he had nightmares. That sometimes he yelled in his sleep. Names, numbers, orders. He had seen things too. Maybe worse than me. But I never asked. Greta barely looked at me anymore. She just handed me food and nodded. I think pretending I didn't exist was the only way she could sleep at night. Sometimes, I'd hear children playing in the distance. That's what hurt the most. The innocence. The sound of a world still turning. While I sat underground, a ghost beneath a town that would have hung me from a tree if they knew I was there. One afternoon, Marcus came down without warning. No food, no blanket, just a bottle and a stare. Sat across from me, drank, and whispered in broken English. "My brother died because of your bombs." I didn't move, didn't blink. He laughed, but there was no joy in it. Then he said something I never expected. "You scream at night. Like The rest of us. He stood up, left the bottle beside me, and walked away. That was the first real conversation I'd had in weeks, and it was with a man who could kill me at any moment. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from fear, but from what I realized. Even though we were enemies, we were both prisoners. Different sides of the same hell. But the true danger wasn't Marcus. It wasn't even the war above. It was what I was becoming in that basement. Because when you live like a ghost long enough, you start forgetting you were ever human at all. It was a quiet morning. Too quiet. No boots on the floor. No clinking dishes. No radio playing scratchy German marches upstairs. Just silence. Greta didn't come down at the usual time. No bread. No water. Nothing. I waited for hours listening then. Creaking. Footsteps. 2 sets. One heavy, one impossibly light. I held my breath. The door to the basement opened slowly. It wasn't Greta. It wasn't Marcus. It was a girl. Maybe 8, maybe 9. Blonde hair in braids. She stared at me with the wide-eyed stillness of someone who had seen too much for her age. She didn't scream. She just looked. Then held out a crust of bread, wrapped in cloth. Behind her, Greta appeared frantic. She pulled the child back. With a sharp whisper, shut the door, and locked it. I sat there for hours, holding that bread in my lap, uneaten. The girl's eyes haunted me more than any explosion ever had. Later that night, Marcus came down drunk again, but this time, angrier. He cursed at Greta, at me, at the ceiling itself. Then he pointed at me with shaking hands and muttered, "She shouldn't have seen you. You don't belong in this house." And he was right. I was a danger to all of them. If anyone in the village talked, if the girl said the wrong thing at the wrong time, their entire family would disappear, or worse. That night, I made a decision. At dawn, I would leave. Crawl, if I had to. Die in a ditch, maybe. But I wouldn't let that little girl's kindness be the reason her family suffered. But at dawn, it snowed. Not just snow. A blizzard whiteout. No visibility. No sound but the wind howling like the ghosts of every man I watched die. Greta came down, handed me warm tea, and looked me straight in the eyes. "You stay," she said, her voice trembling. "One more day." That one more day turned into another week. And then the knock came at the door upstairs. And everything we had built in silence was about to collapse. The knock was sharp, calculated. Not the kind neighbors use. From below. I froze. Greta moved quickly. Too quickly for a woman her age. She closed the curtains, whispered to the girl. Marcus shouted something I couldn't catch. Then, silence. Again, I could hear the door creak open above me. A man's voice. Calm, but heavy. Every word he spoke felt like it carried weight. Authority, or worse, immunity. I crawled closer to the wooden beam near the stairs, pressing my ear to the ceiling. They spoke in low German. I could only catch fragments. Words like registry, movement, and inspection. Then, "We've had reports." Reports of what? Greta's voice came next, softer, trembling, trying to sound casual. She offered tea. The man declined. I heard boots pacing the wooden floor above me. He was looking around. I held my breath. Then, 2 slow footsteps toward the basement door. My heart felt like it would break through my ribs. Marcus stopped him. Spoke firmly. A full sentence. I only caught the end. "Just rats. We poisoned them weekly." There was a pause. Then the man laughed. Coldly. A sound like someone pretending to be human. He stayed for 20 more minutes. 20 minutes. Where I didn't move a muscle. Where every creak in the floor felt like a death sentence. Then finally, the front door closed. The wind took over again. Greta came down later with shaking hands, carrying a bucket of ash and old papers. She dumped them into the furnace without a word. I noticed she was crying, not sobbing. Just leaking. Like her soul couldn't hold the pressure anymore. Later that night, Marcus came downstairs and sat beside me. He didn't drink this time. He said only one thing. "That man wears black, so no one can see the blood." And then he stood, walked upstairs, and locked the door behind him. From that moment on, I knew something had changed. I wasn't just hiding from soldiers anymore. I was hiding from someone who already suspected I existed. And next time, he wouldn't knock. After that visit, everything changed. Greta stopped speaking entirely. She moved like a ghost, quiet, precise, distant. The little girl never came near the basement door again. I could still hear her laugh upstairs sometimes, but it sounded thinner now. Cautious. Marcus installed a second lock on the basement door. He didn't explain why. He didn't have to. They were scared. And fear makes people do things they swore they never would. The silence in the basement grew heavier. I began to talk to myself, just to hear a voice, any voice. I recited names of my fallen friends, my mother's address, lines from a book I once read as a boy. I couldn't tell if I was keeping my sanity alive, or slowly digging its grave. That winter was cruel. The cold crept through the stone walls and settled into my bones. My legs still hadn't healed properly. Some days, it was hard to breathe, not from injury, but from the weight of being forgotten. Then one night, something new. Voices, two of them, loud, heated. Marcus and Greta arguing in the kitchen. Above, I couldn't make out the words, but it wasn't about me this time. It was about him, the man in black. He had returned to the village, asking questions. Not about soldiers or war, but about Greta's dead husband. A man no one had seen since the start of the war. I didn't understand at first. Why would the officer care about that? Then I remembered something. A single photograph on the basement shelf. Dusty, half hidden behind a jar of nails. It showed Greta, and a man in uniform, not German, French, or maybe Polish. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't the only person being hidden in this house. I wasn't even the first. There had been another secret buried in these walls long before me. And suddenly, I wasn't sure who I was more afraid of. The man outside in the black coat, or the family who had decided I was useful, until I wasn't. The next morning, the smell of smoke reached the basement. Not firewood, not the gentle kind used to heat a kettle. This was sharp, chemical, something burning that shouldn't be. I pressed my ear to the wall. The village wasn't quiet anymore. Voices yelling. A scream. Later, Greta came down. Her hands were covered in soot. Her coat smelled like scorched paper. She didn't bring food. Just one word. Books. I didn't understand. She opened the furnace in the corner and threw in a stack of old documents. Photos. Letters. One of them had a military seal I recognized, but not from her country. Mine. Greta looked at me then, for the first time in days. Her eyes were cold. Not hateful, not kind, just ... distant. Like I was already gone. I asked, "Why are you burning them?" She paused, then said in broken English, "No past, no proof." And she walked away. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought about that photograph on the shelf, about the uniform that wasn't German, about the locked drawer I once saw Greta shut quickly when she thought I was asleep. I wasn't sure what frightened me more, being discovered by the man in the black coat, or learning too much about the people who were protecting me. The next time Marcus came down, he didn't speak. He handed me a newspaper folded to the center page. On it was a grainy image. A man in chains. The caption read, "Traitor caught hiding enemy spy. Trial to begin Monday." Not in our village, but close. Marcus waited for me to look up, then leaned in. He gave shelter. That's all. Now, they'll hang him. I nodded slowly. He took the paper back and left. That night, I wrote a note, my first since the war began. Not a letter home. Not a confession. Just a single sentence, over and over. If they turn on me, I won't wait to be taken. Because now, I wasn't sure if I was their guest, or their insurance. And soon, I'd be forced to find out. Days passed like slow bullets. The war was no longer just outside the walls. It had slipped inside. Every glance, every silence, felt like a trap. Greta barely spoke now, but her eyes told stories of battles I'd never fight, against guilt, fear, and memories best left buried. Marcus avoided the basement altogether. I caught him once, staring at the door with a cigarette trembling between his fingers, like it might burn the truth away. One evening, footsteps thundered upstairs. The door burst open. 2 soldiers stood there. Not German, not ours. Foreign. Uniforms, accents sharp like broken glass. They didn't smile. They barked orders. Questioned Greta. Searched the house. Marcus argued. Voices rose. Threats. Fear. Betrayal. I stayed silent, heart pounding. They never came downstairs. But that night, Marcus left. No goodbye. No explanation. Only a note slipped under the basement door. I'm sorry. The walls felt colder. I realized I was alone. Except for Greta, she sat beside me, hands wrinkled and trembling. For the first time, she took mine in hers. No words, just a look, a silent promise that neither of us was safe anymore, and that if I wanted to survive, I couldn't trust anyone but myself. Days blurred into nights. Silence was no longer a comfort, it was a suffocating weight. Without Marcus, the house felt like a cage. Greta's quiet presence was both a comfort and a reminder. I was still a prisoner, not a guest. One evening, as I lay on the cold stone floor, the basement door creaked open. Greta stood there, eyes wet but resolute. In her hands, a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She handed it to me without a word. Inside was a small radio, battered but intact. "Listen," she whispered. Static buzzed. Then a voice, soft, urgent. A resistance broadcast. They spoke of hope, of liberation, of a new world after the war. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to dream, but hope was dangerous. The man in the black coat was still out there, watching, waiting, and I knew the silence would end. Soon, the snow melted. The war shifted. One night, the basement door creaked again. But this time, it wasn't fear that gripped me. It was resolve. Greta stood there, her face pale but determined. She whispered, "It's safe now, you can leave." I hesitated. After 6 months, the outside world was a stranger, a place of shadows and memories too sharp to face. But I climbed the stairs. The village was broken, silent, empty in many places, but not forgotten. A lone bird sang. Greta's family stood behind me. Survivors. Marcus wasn't there. I understood. He had paid a price for sheltering me. I promised then to carry their stories, to remember the fear, the kindness, the betrayals, and to live not just as a soldier who hid, but as a man who survived the darkest nights. Because sometimes, the greatest battles aren't fought on battlefields. They're fought in basements, behind locked doors, in the shadows of enemies and allies alike. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply to keep breathing.